Today's guest, Rico, Senior Technical Recruiter at Miro.
So this is how we're using it at Miro. I had to kind of omit a lot. Of course, it's an internal document, so we don't want to share that much. But what I'm looking at for anybody listening in is basically a table with 4 different pillars. Ideally, these are tied to your company values. You might have more or less company values. We have 4. And one that I did highlight is business partnership. So I'm looking at one of the 4 pillars where there's clearly a distinction between, okay, we are looking at business partnership. This is looking into 2 of our core values, actually. So impact and collaboration, mostly impact. And with a short description to kind of know what this is all about. And here to read out, we want to move away from being just order takers, like transactional recruitment, but actually becoming strategic advisors. This is something that we see. The more senior you get, the more of a function this is going to be. But already from the start, we would like to have this. And I made one example that I can show. So in the table or in the framework, we have these 4 pillars. Then we have components or competencies, and all the competencies have certain behaviors. Now, these behaviors in kind of our recruitment leadership team, they've been identified. What types of behaviors are there for a junior recruiter, a normal recruiter, senior recruiter, principal recruiter? So in this way, it really gives a clear framework on auto scoring yourself. And this is what I've done basically from the start, where I was handed kind of this framework and then really guiding my way through it. What I've depicted here is stakeholder management, just generally one of the competencies. Stakeholder management, I think, is quite transferable for a lot of different roles. But of course, there's different layers to this. And here you can see as a recruiter that you stay aligned with multiple hiring managers on recruitment in their function and looking at team mobility. Seeing if there's any internal moves possible.
We talked about career development, career frameworks, also the setup at Miro in recruitment. They are quite sophisticated, and also on how to use a data-driven approach, what to do with certain metrics, how to leverage them for stakeholder management and process improvement.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very, 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 very hard to change things.
That was the learning.
Entrepreneurs with empathy.
To the people side.
Today's guest is Rico from Miro, and we got introduced in Amsterdam back then when we were at a recruiting conference. And I remember that Ala Pavlovna, she introduced us because we also did an episode on tech recruiting. Then we met, and then you also came, and then we got introduced, and then we talked about, hey, that would be nice to also talk about your expertise, your context, because I know that Miro has a very high standard, high quality, high performing recruiting function. And to be honest, I'm also a big fan of Miro by myself. So maybe Rico, you can introduce yourself and give us more context.
Great. Well, thanks, Thomas. And also thanks, of course, a bit of a shout out to Allah for connecting us at the recruitment conference. That's what the power of networking does. So in that sense, great. Yeah, happy to be here. So for everyone listening, I'm Rico, Habraken, if you want the last name as well. I'm a senior technical recruiter at Miro currently. Overall, I've been basically doing recruitment or been a part of recruitment for the past 6+ years, more or less. At Miro, I had a bit of a journey starting on the business side, which is basically everything that's non-technical, and then making a shift and going into more of engineering hiring, engineering recruitment. That has been for the past year, also internationally in terms of different hubs. At Miro, we have different engineering hubs specifically, which is Amsterdam, Berlin, and Yerevan in Armenia. And I've been hiring for all of them. So that has been quite a nice position to be in, to have all of that exposure. And besides that, Miro, happy to hear that you love using Miro. I think we have plenty of use cases in recruitment generally. We sip our own champagne at Miro, I have to say, where we are also using it extensively, not only for our own topics, but also in the interview process quite often. So let's dive into that later as well. Whatever you would like to share more about, but that would be, I think, in short, quick
Yes, I also
introduction.
saw on LinkedIn that you were a croupier. How did that came up, and what's the job of a croupier? I sometimes in Austria also played casino, so I think it's quite
Yes.
a cool job sitting there.
Yeah, nice. That's a blast from the past, but yes, a croupier, not a groupie, in case anyone is thinking otherwise. But a croupier or dealer is someone basically when you go to a live casino with someone behind the table, either dealing the cards for blackjack or basically leading the game of American roulette, for example. Those were the things I did at Holland Casino for quite a while. Started out as well, one interest in casino, second, having to do something next to basically the masters I was um, conducting at the University of Amsterdam. So then I started out doing blackjack, learned roulette on the side as well. I think a bit of poker, but more like the dealer poker, which is not the one of the Texas Hold'em variant. But yeah, that was quite nice. It was a side job, stuck a little bit longer, but then at some point, it's a very nice job actually. But there's a danger of kind of getting stuck in that and then keeping into that rhythm. So I decided, okay, let's change, and then really the career I would say
Yeah, I think you also get
started
a
from
lot of
that point.
tips there, right?
It depends. So yeah, I think that's maybe like a public secret in that sense. With some casinos and maybe back dealer or back room, you might get this. But yeah, in Holland Casino, you had kind of the sharing system. So across all of the different venues, yes, you do get tip, but then it's shared, and actually it's quite nicely spread around everyone, so that everyone gets involved into that as well.
Cool. Okay, but then let's talk a bit more about Miro, and thank you so much for the introduction. What I would be super interested in first, what's the state of current recruitment at Miro? How are you set up overall when you describe the setup? Because I know from candidates in the past, either on a lead, head, director level, when I did some leadership executive searches for the talent acquisition space, I had some candidates at Miro or working at Miro, and I think I never hired one, but we had good calls, and I was super excited about the approach. So maybe you can tell us a bit more.
And then with the approach, you mean more or less how recruitment generally is set up at Miro?
Yes, exactly.
Nice. Yeah, I think there, I really like this type of structure. Actually, it's also been documented quite well in one of the books of the founders of Greenhouse called Talent Makers. Quick shout out there too, I guess. But there they describe actually what Miro has implemented already, and I think a lot of tech companies do have, where there's not just recruiting as a function, there's recruiters and they do all the work. Of course, there's plenty of things that come into play when you talk about a recruitment function in general. I think I can actually share my screen quickly here, where I have basically a bit of this department set up lined up. But here you see a couple of parts. So, of course, employer brand, recruitment operations at the bottom, recruitment on the side with recruiters and sourcers included, and then recruitment coordination, where recruitment coordinators do their magic. Sometimes in smaller companies, all of these topics kind of fall onto the recruitment team. But to be fair, that's not the best division, I would say, because there's plenty to do in all four of these areas. Of course, recruitment part, that's quite specific. You're responsible of filling the roles and being hopefully a strategic partner as well. But I think the interesting part comes when we're talking about recruitment coordination or recruitment operations. And to give a bit of definition on this, recruitment coordination is everything that has to do with scheduling. I would say not per se from that first conversation with a recruiter, but everything afterwards, hiring manager interviews, interview panels, difficult schedules and calendars that a leadership team has. I mean, it's going to take a lot of time from recruiters and sources alike to get all of that scheduled. And then especially if you're hiring quite a lot. At Miro, we've experienced hyper growth. You definitely need someone who's just super fast in being able to schedule. And this is the magic that recruitment coordination does. Like without them, it would be so much slower to get people into these roles and having their bum in seats, sometimes is also mentioned. So that's one part. Having someone specifically there for scheduling, that's awesome. I would say. I really vouch for them there.
Definitely. And I think also once you did not work with recruitment coordinators, you cannot imagine and think, why should I need them? Yeah. But once I think you are A, in need, or B, have the luxury, or not even the luxury, it should be, I would say also an industry standard or benchmark at some point, to do so, then nobody wants to do it without recruitment coordinators. And I think also the benefits there are, when you just look at the candidate experience, the time to hire, you have significant higher or better numbers there than without the function, which is what a lot of, I would say, or companies, teams, departments that are hesitant, they don't understand that yet.
Yes, I definitely agree. Not only such a kind of simple metric as reducing your time to hire, basically getting hires faster. It's also about some of the work that a recruiter usually does, or the back and forth between a candidate and rescheduling, or having 4 or 5 different members on team interview rounds where you don't even have the time to kind of schedule that while you're screening new candidates. This is something, a lot of the help that recruitment coordination also takes away, and it's really helpful. Yes, they're scheduling tools, they are a very good assist, but there's still the human interaction piece of, can you move something in your calendar? Because some of the calendars are just packed. It's not as simple as just syncing your calendar, looking at it like, oh, this is a free spot. So there's a lot of moving parts, and recruitment coordination, if applied correctly, they do it amazingly. And at Miro, yes, they do an awesome job. Second point, I would go into recruitment ops. So here, quite simply, you would think of all the tooling that you have. I think at Miro, we have it quite luxury. There's quite a lot of tools that we are able to use, such as analytics tool, talent wall. Of course, we have our ATS, which is Greenhouse. We have some scheduling tools, and there's actually a bunch, of course, like LinkedIn Recruiter. Those are some basic ones that likely everyone has. But even if you just have one, there's the back and forth between renewing a contract, making sure you have a best deal for the next year that you are buying licenses, how to deal with all of that as a contact person. In smaller teams, it's also part of a recruiter's task. This is all valuable time of everyone, of course. But if you would have that fall into recruitment ops and also use it to kind of tweak how your processes work and how that relates in the tooling itself, this is just really helpful to have as a separate function. And if I have to quote the book Talent Makers again, I think one of the specific things they mentioned, if you hire the first 2 people, you have one recruiter and one recruitment ops, because just there you already have your tooling in place, you can have your setup in place while you're actually hiring. So this is something like a backup function, a very invisible function that is within the department. You'd absolutely need, don't often see, but you're very happy that it's there.
Nice. And what is your current team size where you, current team size where you have this function, or this department set up in that functions? Can you also share the number of the team members, what you currently have?
Yeah, I think for recruitment coordination, currently we have three or four members, most in Europe. There's one in the US as well. We're also hiring there quite often. Right now, you do see that there's not so much difference between the two areas, because when something needs to be picked up, it's also picked up for other time zones. That's a bit more challenging, I would say, but still apparently is managed really quite well. So it's actually a small function for all the hiring that we have done in the past. But yeah, they're very efficient, and that's the case when they're focusing on that specific part of their expertise. It just really helps. In recruitment ops also, for example, is kind of training, right? So hiring manager training, just generally a global interviewer training. So I would see it as two different pieces that are within that. More kind of that either internal customer facing part, which is training and enablement, but also the part of the real hardcore backend tooling. Overall, just from the top of my head, I think we have about 5 or 6 people in recruitment ops. And then right now, recruitment is split, plus sourcers split across non-tech and tech, or business and tech recruiting, as we call it. I think we have 25 to 30 people more or less in there. And then we haven't even touched on employer brand. That's a small but mighty team. I think 3 or 4 that we have over there, but valuable, quite valuable. I mean, we have kind of this employer brand digest, or kind of a monthly newsletter with all the efforts they are doing, and this is incumbent for the top of funnel in the end, right? Because we already see a major shift, and I think this is something I'm fine with sharing, that from relying heavily on referrals and sourcing, referrals still a big part, but actually if we look at the past, I would say quarter or half year even, most of our hires actually have come from the company branding our career site. And this is really because of the efforts of employer brand in every direction, from just generally updating the careers page to having a lot of content for different areas of the business, really creating a strong top of funnel. This is what employer brand does. And there's so much effort going into that.
And I also see, I also think that when you just look at the market dynamics, it's now a bit more several candidates that maybe look actively are also, let's say, there for one job versus when you do the number 1.5 years ago, where maybe very less number of candidates that are actively open or looking are there for one job because we had a number of layoffs a lot, right? But additionally to that, you then should be the one attracting the right candidates for you, right? So that's something what is really important that you have. And I think that's also what you highlighted. It's not just the number of applications or interest or visits on certain websites or job sites, I don't know. It's also the number of hires you make, because that's ultimately coming then down to quality. The next step would be then measuring the quality of each hire, which can be several episodes because it has so many aspects of it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's why your podcast definitely has several episodes anyways, because there's so much, to dive into and unpack. Yes. All of these different topics, you can look at what are best practices and how to best go about it.
So thank you for the insights. What is a volume you can run with this function? Because you also said that, or not you said, but what I saw from Miro and also how I understand it, it's a product development company and you don't have huge volume roles like maybe a company that needs to have local operations everywhere, ramp up blue collar workers and so on. You really have a product development focus and don't have these volume roles.
Yes, that's true. So it's not in that sense there's one where you hire 100 of the same that we have. We do have something that we call evergreen roles. So for example, a senior backend engineer does come across more often. But yes, it's definitely a mix of evergreen roles and just one-off roles. And that definitely leads to volume taking a hit, right? Because you need to ramp up, you need to calibrate what the interview process looks like. Although we have it pretty much standardized, still there can be different tweaks to every type of role or department that they're in, who needs to be involved, and also getting them aligned. Specific question on how many you can actually do with this setup, that depends. So I think with this setup you can do quite a lot depending on the type of roles you have. The setup is there, but then we look at it, I think we had more or less 350 hires in total so far this year. And then with what it used to be a relatively smaller team. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Cool, understood. It's also good for context. And also when we look into the topic of career development, in case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. How do you think a recruiter or recruiter person that is maybe in some of the roles, how can they develop also maybe at Miro?
Well, at Miro, I think it's quite clear. We have a quite nice. I wasn't able to share this here, and since we're also listening, that's a lot tougher to share. But I do have something I will try to describe. Generally, there's 2 ways. So one is your current function and how can you evolve in your current function. Second is what's the movement like within maybe the department. So for example, having a transition from recruitment coordinator, moving into a sourcing function, moving into the recruiter function. Those are typically the type of lateral moves that you do see that are really attainable. You don't see it that much the other way around, from what I can see. But still, it's good to have the idea of what type of lateral movement can you make. Also, for example, to employer brand. But there's a lot of other things that employer brand does, like marketing and then SEO and these types of things that aren't immediately there in the other roles. So there's definitely some gap, skills gap potentially there. What I think is easiest, as a framework, it's something that we use at Miro for our career development, and that I have actively used in the past 2 years that I've been at Miro as well. It's kind of a competency framework. So it's not just, this is something that you do see quite a lot, not just about hires. Having the most amount of hires in the company will get you to the next level. It's a very one-sided area to look at. And then that's also quite hard to compare, because if I have a lot of senior roles and someone else has more this evergreen role where it's very relatively easy to ramp up a pipeline instead of having one-off senior roles, how do you compare then the 4 against the 10 of someone else? Then is that other person better than the other? You don't know. So what we do, and I'll try to highlight what I'm sharing on the screen, is kind of a recruiter competency framework. So this is how we're using it at Miro. I had to kind of omit a lot. Of course, it's an internal document, so we don't want to share that much. But what I'm looking at for anybody listening in is basically a table with 4 different pillars. Ideally, these are tied to your company values. You might have more or less company values. We have 4. And one that I did highlight is business partnership. So I'm looking at one of the 4 pillars, where there's clearly a distinction between, okay, we are looking at business partnership. This is looking into 2 of our core values, actually. So impact and collaboration, mostly impact. And with a short description to kind of know what this is all about. And here to read out, we want to move away from being just order takers, like transactional recruitment, but actually becoming strategic advisors. This is something that we see. The more senior you get, the more of a function this is going to be. But already from the start, we would like to have this. And I made one example that I can show. So in the table or in the framework, we have these 4 pillars. Then we have components or competencies, and all the competencies have certain behaviors. Now, these behaviors in kind of our recruitment leadership team, they've been identified. What types of behaviors are there for a junior recruiter, a normal recruiter, senior recruiter, principal recruiter? So in this way, it really gives a clear framework on auto scoring yourself. And this is what I've done basically from the start, where I was handed kind of this framework and then really guiding my way through it. What I've depicted here is stakeholder management, just generally one of the competencies. Stakeholder management, I think, is quite transferable for a lot of different roles. But of course, there's different layers to this. And here you can see as a recruiter that you stay aligned with multiple hiring managers on recruitment in their function and looking at team mobility. Seeing if there's any internal moves possible. As a senior recruiter, you're expected to do a bit more. So basically, you're the point of escalation for one specific area. If there's any issues arising, you also liaise with finance, with people, business partners, just generally on hiring plans. Anything that you need to have more cross-functional alignment as well. And just kind of listing what I have written down here. Advising stakeholders on their strategic hiring and interview process from start to finish. So that already starts basically before you even draft a kickoff doc with what is actually on the role itself and really necessary, but already, where in your organization or in your department should we really pay most attention. What I want to say with this, because this is specific on one competency, generally here, it just gives you a nice framework on, look, I started as a recruiter. I look at this entire framework. I look at all the pillars, and I basically score myself: red, amber, or yellow, and green. I can do that for specific behaviors, even, or just on general competency, and kind of see where I think self-reflectively I'm at, and that immediately gives you the area where there's any gaps in your development. You can also ask, and I think this is one of the key things, ask your manager to look at it at the same time and basically have them share what they think where you are at that point. Always interesting to see if there's a lot of difference between the two. If that's not the case, that's actually good, but immediately you can see where do you then need to build, right? What is the thing that I can do? And can I also do it? If there's something on data-driven decision making, do I all of a sudden start doing that if I don't have any knowledge? No, but at least I know this is an area that I need to address. So then let's move forward and ask someone, and this is what I did, ask someone, look, I'm working on my career development. I think this is a big gap that I have, data-driven decision making or using data to influence stakeholders. Is there someone who can just have 30 minutes on the calendar with me and share with me how they do it? Within Miro, the answer is always yeah. There's always someone who will help you. This was the case for us. And because I shared it in kind of a public channel, there were other recruiters who said, hey, this is interesting. Add me as well to this meeting. So we had in the end a training, I think, of 8 people going into that meeting and then really helping out with this particular competency and then building on that learning to implement it in the day-to-day. Yeah, so this is one piece. Yes, and I'll pause there.
No, it's really cool, and it's really, I would say, straightforward and also clear. So if you want, I can also show you mine, because I also created one for PeopleWise and our recruiters, because we support companies, right, at early stage companies, let's say then scaling phases, or then also a bit more mature or global scaling phases where it's really just about, okay, I enter this market, that market, and so on, at the scale of, I don't know, Uber and so on, right? And I had set it up a bit similar, so I just share it here, and I just said, okay, there are components, competencies, and job levels. And the components are talent partnering, sourcing, data literacy, and operational excellence. And talent partnering consists out of business partnering, stakeholder management, problem solving, and planning. Then sourcing is market mapping and shortlisting, or getting candidates attracted, right? Then data literacy is data analysis, reporting, and data accuracy, because sometimes there's also a problem then that you need first the infrastructure that you can rely on data, right? And operational excellence means self-management, systemization, project management, and sense of urgency. And then we have several roles like junior talent partner, senior talent partner, talent lead, and director. We don't have a principle defined yet, but maybe it will come. And then here it's really described very well. So if we zoom out, it's quite big. Yeah. Oops, now I zoomed in. Right, that everybody has clearly defined the behavior, and we do it the same. That you can get training based on your self-assessment plus manager assessment, but sometimes peer assessment, and then creating a plan. So it's really cool. And then also having some training frameworks, collaboration sessions, and so on to really learn that. And also I've maybe put it in the show notes. It can be downloaded or granted access to for everyone, because I wanted to make it public to raise the awareness of how a recruitment function can look like.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think what you just showed in terms, it's really similar to what we have. The only difference with what I've been showing and what you've been showing is that it was more in Excel and mine is on a Miro board. We have both, to be honest. We also have this built out for every function. So when it comes to engineering, when it comes to marketing, product, analytics, finance, there's quite a lot built out there, and also something that you will have to do, because having this framework gives also a lot of clarity for any employee in your company to know, hey, what could be next? Do I want to be in that next level as well? And give them growth, give them specific tools to manage their growth. And in the end, it has to be the individual to drive it. But if you can give the tools, this is so strong to just work with.
Maybe another point we touch is data-driven decision-making, because I think also that you are quite data-driven, and also Miro overall acts data-driven. So could you give us a crash course or overall context on how you think data-driven decision-making, why it's important, and how you do it?
Yeah, definitely. Good point. In terms of data-driven, so what does that really mean? Actually, also here, I made a short kind of slide on this, and also describe. All the slides are quite simple, to be honest, because I know we're recording a podcast, so I didn't want to make any really amazing stuff. But basically, there's 2 areas. You can have it for process improvement, data that will lead you the way of what processes do I need to improve. There's also stakeholder management, just giving you more arguments than just, hey, I have a gut feeling that we don't do something right. And this is the worst thing we can say.
Yes,
it's the worst thing we can hear.
Yeah, exactly. Or also demanding something from them that they act, because this is also what I saw, that stakeholders, they don't report into you. Yeah. It's more a bit that you even report somehow into them. But if you need to change their behavior, you better have strong evidence on what you're asking for to make them change, let's say, providing more interview time or slots or being faster in responding or whatever it is. Sorry.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And basically what you would call this on, for example, staff engineering level, is influencing without authority, right? You don't have a management layer there. So it's like, how do you then still convince and influence? My observation is that with Miro, we have it everywhere across the business. I did see in the start, at least when I started, I was on the business side, then moved into technical recruiting. It is way more status quo and standard by default in the technical side than it is on the business side. It was kind of viewed as, wow, you're bringing me all this kind of data, really a backed up story to work with. And yes, let's change something in the requirements. And on the technical side is show me the data. Like it's an as is. So being data savvy in that sense will really help, just knowing what to look out for, also what's interesting. It's not always about, hey, how many profiles did we scan on LinkedIn? We're really quite operational. It's more strategic on what are the specific rejection reasons if we map them across all of our senior backend engineers of the last 6 months. That's a bit different. So what I did, I made a slide. There's a couple of kind of standard metrics that everyone either should use or is using already. For some, it might be familiar. For some, it might not. But I kind of want to talk you through what you would suggest. Like, is it stakeholder management influencing, or is it a process improvement? And yes, there is a catch. Probably a lot of them are going to be both. Right. So some very specific ones: time to fill, time to start. Below, there's also time to hire. Those, are they more for process improvement or just stakeholder management?
Also headcount planning, to be honest, because I think the time to start or a time to hire can be very much misinterpreted. Because candidates entering the funnel until they get hired, right, is maybe sometimes not included there. That you sometimes 2-3 weeks search for somebody entering the funnel and then you hire them. You have a good time to hire, for instance, but maybe a bad time to start and also a bad time to fill because there's so much time that nothing happened. Yeah, or no results happened. And also then you have notice periods as well, right? So not forget that one.
Especially in Germany.
Yes. Or also time to kick off a role after it's approved, right? That's also something what sometimes gets really important.
Oh, yes. Oh, a very painful point for many organizations. I have no doubt. Really, sometimes to already build the plane while flying is not always the best idea, especially if it's a volume role or there's just tons of applications coming your way. You then don't have time anymore. So indeed, time to kick off. Having that short amount of time, but actually time to align is something that some people also use. But here, it depends. Initially, I would say it helps with stakeholder management. That is where I first would immediately think of. But still, I can't really, I can duplicate these and put them also on the other side of process improvement. But just generally, it's a very strong argument when the first thing a hiring manager says, someone left, I need a backfill, I need them next month. And you can already say, look, our average time to hire, our average time to fill, and we have a notice period, our average time to start. You can expect this person in 7 months' time from today, if we start hiring now and we haven't even aligned. So already, immediately from the get-go, you're like, look, don't put pressure on me to have a hire next month because it's I tell you, it's impossible. Look at all the historical data we have. So that's something just generally to have a really strong argument and then look at, okay, of course we look at what is reasonable. We always try to do what is the best, but it really sets expectations, and expectations generally with candidates, but also with hiring managers will really help for you to be a good business partner in that sense. Some others, because I know I put a lot here, when it comes to hires by source. Well, let's look at that one. Hires by source. So then I'm talking about third company marketing? Is it your career side? Is it prospecting? More stakeholder management or more process improvement?
I would put it to more process improvement because usually they don't care about where the hire is coming from. Yeah, I would say. But of course, you can also then see, okay, which channels are going well, but you can also maybe have a different argument. What are your thoughts?
Both. It's both. Yes, process improvement, that does work. But it gives you a strong argument in saying, look, a significant amount of our hires, like statistically significant even, has come from referrals, for example. Just generally, the amount of referrals that convert to a hire is so much higher than the amount of general applications converting to a hire. So it's like, before we even kick off this role, let's talk with you, let's talk with the team, let's do a referral jam or a session to get you to check your network first. And we kind of prioritize these candidates. Great topic. Having someone basically in the process faster, because the one thing that I haven't put is time to source, like time to source the right candidates so that they are in the funnel, is also something there. So this part of hires by source, and then actually having them earlier on in the funnel already, that's very strong in terms of, yes, of course, improving your processes to make it faster, but also to influence your stakeholder and saying, look, this is the way we should go.
I like the approach. Yeah. Because sometimes you also need time from them, also their access maybe to their profiles to say, hey, reach out to these 50 candidates because we need source candidates. And when you reach out from your profile, we maybe increase the chance by 30% or whatever.
Definitely. Yes. Plus, it depends a little bit how strong you are in terms of your technical knowledge. But in engineering, I'm never going to be able to be on par, with an engineering manager with 15 years of experience, right? So you need them. You need them for their expertise. I can do everything with the recruitment process and making sure that we have our hiring strategy in order. But when it comes to checking if someone is, technically savvy enough, they need to tell me. I can't code with them, for example, right? I can do basically a high level overview of what they're going to do and what their interesting projects are going to be. Definitely that part, but you need the partnership. The transactional part of recruitment, yeah, it in the end, it's really old fashioned. You need to do that together because all of the metrics will be better once you actually start to work together. And if you have a lot of hiring managers in your company and you're like, well, they don't do that. I get every week, I hear, hey, there's 3 more hires we need, get them. Start with one, right? Start with one hiring manager you have a good relationship with. Basically tell them, look, this is the strategy I want to follow. You are going to hire much faster than everybody else. Once that actually starts to happen, all the other hiring managers are going to say, how are you hiring so fast? And the other ones are not. It's like, yeah, because I'm working together with my recruiter, not just asking them to fill seats. And just, it can be really daunting if you don't have a good setup already, but start with one. That's what I would say. I know we're going fast through our time. So just some of these, like, I will just give you the answer. But pass-through conversion rates, clearly process improvement. If you don't have data, and actually have a very nice example. So if you're looking at this from YouTube, then you can see it. Like just general pass-through rates. I just took one role somewhere that we filled. What this lists is a table going from application review to hired, and it has pass rates for every stage. Looking at this, you can see where the bottlenecks, because in the end, those numbers matter. If you have 1,000 candidates in the process, but in the end, at offer stage, everybody rejects, you still have 0 hires. If you look at those numbers, and they have quite many people in there, you can use these numbers to improve just the funnel generally on where do people withdraw or where people are rejected the most. So in this case, we have, for example, team interview round already, and this is for an engineering role. So an engineer, they would pass through all the technical assessments. You look at a team interview round, it's 43%. It's quite low, actually. We want the team to be aligned, to know what they want, and then have this candidate who's already technically fine go through the process. So we would aim for more or less 75%. And having this increased and seeing that this is an issue, there can be a lot of explanations, right? It can be that candidates are just not good enough, but I think that's too easy of an explanation. Maybe the team's not aligned. Maybe there's interviewer training we need to do. There's so many things that you can look into to try and tackle this. And this is actually a problem that we've had and that we've tackled. So then it indeed
and
was
also
more
if you
than
look at the
70%.
11 days, right? So not many pass, and then it also takes the longest average days in stage at that late stage. It's not a good sign. So this should be improved. But of course, sometimes it's tough. So you need data and evidence to show why, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because generally, from a leadership perspective, you would say we're not getting any hires. It's like, yeah, why? You're not doing enough. Potentially, well, this is not the way I would communicate with my hiring managers. But I can imagine that this is a question: why are we not hiring? And with this type of data, pass-through rates, you can easily see, hey, this is where the bottleneck is, or maybe we should be more selective, or anything deriving from that. So definitely process improvement. Scorecard results. Sometimes the interviewer is the problem. Scorecard results per interviewer is a statistic we have. We don't look at it often, but sometimes we do, especially if we see things are going wrong. And you can simply exclude someone, yeah, unfortunately. But if people have such a high bar for themselves or comparing with themselves and say, look, nobody is good enough to join my team, yeah, then maybe we have to change the interview process or not hire for that position because, we can do a lot of work, but we can hire somewhere else if necessary. That's tough for the business to ask, but this is a discussion that you can have based on this data.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it.
And then others, just generally looking at withdrawal reasons, why is someone moving out of a process themselves? What is a rejection reason at offer stage, but also before? And yeah, you touched upon it, quality of hire. That's a tough one. What are your thoughts actually on quality of hire?
I think you cannot look at it two-dimensional to say, yeah, somebody passes probation or something like this, or I think you need to look at this on a more long term, also about the life cycle of a hire overall. You also need to include the managers overall, but also the state, the environment of the company, right? If things are clear, it's easier to measure. If objectives are clear, if the role is clear, if it's a first-time role that it's hired, it's really way much tougher to rate that, right? I think you can always differentiate between the functional aspect and the non-functional aspect. I think the non-functional aspect can be more towards the culture and towards the fit towards the current organizational phase. But maybe a lot of hires are made through times of a lot of uncertainties, a lot of changes, then maybe you would think the quality of hires drop because there are so many changes or people drop out or are not the right fit anymore. Okay, but also the company strategy or environment changed. So I would not put it down to the quality of hire, but more to the level of ambiguity is now looking into it or affecting attrition, and therefore we just have different circumstances, right? So I think that's a very difficult topic to touch.
I agree. Like already there are so many unknowns that you're putting into the equation. So quality of hire is a really tough metric, but what's the problem you're trying to solve with quality of hire? Are you trying to look at the quality of the hire, or are you maybe looking at how aligned are we as a hiring team?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So if the quality of hire, let's say we had this distinction, right? There's in line with the bar, there's above the bar hires. Candidates that pass really strongly through the interview process, they clearly have one up on anybody else. Is that the case? Like, how is that influenced? It's quite a tough kind of benchmark. What is the bar even, right? We do have a system for it in terms of that competency framework that we were talking about in the start. Having already some competencies on the higher level will kind of indicate being above the bar. Then maybe we have very urgent, or someone is selling themselves really well. They're above the bar in the interview process, but then later, is that still the same? So there we can see if hiring teams are always scoring their candidates above the bar. Is that really the case? So then quality of hire could be, of course, quality of hire coming in as a hire. We have after 3 months, you do kind of an onboarding 360 feedback loop. And then maybe the first performance review, for example. Those are a couple of trend or data points that you can then look at and see, hey, is that aligned with what we started out from? and is there anything we can change? So it depends really on what you're looking for and what problem you're trying to solve.
Definitely. That's a very, very nice content, and thanks for also preparing it that clearly and using Miro. We can see how easy it is to visualize. Rico, final question: who is a guest that you know I don't know yet, who I should interview next?
Ooh, a guest that I know. Depends what topic you want to talk about. Anything recruitment related?
Yeah, it can also be leadership or management related.
I have to think about that.
Cool.
Do you mind?
No, I don't mind at all.
I'll give you a referral.
Definitely. That's also the beauty of the podcast. I want to keep it growing organically through the guests, right? Because I think then it also always tells a story and is kind of somehow cohesive in terms of I have a certain relationship of the guests with each other, and that's really nice. So it was really nice talking to you. Thanks for all the insights, and I'm looking forward to getting this live.
Nice. Yeah, I hope it come across well. And yeah, for everyone listening, thanks for listening to the end, making it up until here. But yeah, of course, you can reach out to me if you want to talk about this more. I'm pretty passionate about all of the topics that we discussed. So in that sense, let me know. Happy to discuss even more.